when I go to prisons, I have a trunk full of paraphernalia. It's full of folders and brochures and just all kinds of stuff that we have. And when I go to a prison yard, and we call, I think you call it assistant wardens, we call it deputy wardens, but whoever's running that yard, I'll make a point to go meet him and meet whoever's in charge of security. And I'll just show up at their office and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And I'll hand them, I'll shake their hands, just sit and talk to them. You know, we have a program here on your yard, we have this going on. I just want to answer any questions you have, just let you know who I am. If anything comes up, feel free to call me, and just stay in touch with them. That senior chaplain, if you have that position here, is hugely important. Everybody at the chain of command that you can connect to. I'll walk into a warden's office in Arizona, and sometimes they'll have time for you, sometimes they won't. Just say, hey, I'm in town, you know, stop by. I got this on my schedule here at the prison, and just wanted to say hi and see if everything's going good. If you know, do you have any comments or anything on Alongside Ministries and that? No, you guys are great. Love what you guys are doing. Amen. And that, good, great. Well, here's my card again. If you ever have any problems, just give me a call. So we have a reputation in DOC that we police our own. We have hundreds of volunteers. Like I said before, I'm on the men's side, but I have a counterpart, so we got all kinds of women going into the women's prison and stuff too. And our reputation is Alongside Ministries polices their own. If we ever have a problem, we don't have to deal with the problem. All we do is call up a director at Alongside Ministries, taken care of like that. And we guard that closely, very closely. That's their playground. That's their world. It's a privilege for you to go in there. It's not a right. Don't lose that privilege by being rigid or, you know, take an issue with something. You know what? That's their deal. It's their world. It's their baby. If that's how they feel about it, that's great.
That's good stuff. Well, we've been at it for about an hour and 5 minutes. Was thinking about an hour and a half. If there's anybody that needs to leave, they can go ahead. But I just kind of want to open up for any questions, any comments, concerns. And again, if anybody has to go, that would be fine. So I open up for any questions.
Too late to go to the automotive class.
Yeah.
Hey Kevin, I was kind of curious. You said the return rate's 82%. Now that's average, right? What is it? Do you know what it is for believers or for those who've made a profession of Christ?
Yeah, I don't have statistics on that. I have heard time and time again that it's exactly the same. There's no difference. For those who are churched in prison, it's no different on the recidivism. And I do not believe that that is because, and I can't support that, by the way. I've just heard that a number of times by a number of different sources. But I do not believe that that is because decisions were insincere or people's walk with Christ in prison was insincere. I believe that their understanding in prison and the culture that's in there and what they understand that walk to look like when they're inside of that culture and how they've learned to walk with Christ in prison, and when they get out, they're not connecting on the outside. And I think it's because of that cross-cultural exchange that happens when they get released. And that, see, for them, see, I don't know your background, but with me, I have things, I mean, at 14 years old, I was hitchhiking all over the country in the 70s, you know. I mean, I had experiences in that. I was in juvenile hall 12 times growing up and stuff, but, and strung out on drugs and all that fun stuff. It just, you cross lines and you have experiences that you should have never had, and you are susceptible to those things until you get really far removed from that. I was a teenager then. I'm 53 now. You know, I'm not tempted to do drugs and stuff. It's so far behind me now that it's like I'm talking about another person. But you see, for them, it was yesterday. they may have been in prison for 7 years, but they just stepped over a line that yesterday they were out there, and that's what they were connecting with. And so mentally what happens in the mind is they go right back to their connection point. We picked up a guy from Kingman Prison. That's a private prison. That's where the escapes were, where a couple guys escaped, went to New Mexico and murdered that couple and stuff. We picked up a guy from Kingman Prison in our program. Within 24 hours, he was hooked up with a gal and he was doing crack. This guy was walking with the Lord. He was viewed by everybody on the yard that this is a strong man of God. And see, we got him back later and we worked with him. And the question was, how soon did you get tempted? The entire time he was in prison, he said he was never tempted with crack. I said, how soon did you get tempted? He said, the minute I walked out the gate. Before I even got into that mentor's car that picked me up. The minute I walked out the gate, it hit me so strong. I was so tempted to go do some crack.
Can you just in just a minute or two kind of explain the honeymoon stage?
Sure. Yeah, let me connect with one other thing. For all of us in here whose hearts go out to the incarcerated community, whatever you do, whatever you invest in an individual, you got to understand that that's for the kingdom of God.
Amen.
You really have to get that, because he may not make it, and when he falls, you can't go down with that. That can't come back to you, like you failed or you should have done this differently or something. See, what happens is a lot of times we want their success more than they do. And all you could do is serve Jesus and feed him water and feed him bread. He has to own it. He has to make it. But what Randy's referring to, we see this all the time. I mean, we can put a clock on it. When the guys get out of prison and they get to, we call it the DTC, that's our housing. And by the way, in reentry, safe housing is huge. It's everything. You have to provide safe housing. You send them to just a halfway house out there, that is a dangerous, dangerous place for them. So they have to have safe housing where the drugs are not an issue there. So they come out to our housing, our discipleship training center, and they are just euphoric. This is so surreal, they can't believe it. It's like heaven on earth. There's grass out there, and there's a nice fountain that's just, you could hear the water flowing in the fountain. And, you know, a lot of times they're apprehensive to just go walk out the street in the first week and that, but they can, and that's the thing. And for them, it's just like, this is so wonderful, this is so great, and you know, just praise Jesus. And they really do mean that. But you know, after week 2, after week 3, and then you get around week 4 and all of that, and responsibility starts hitting them. And having to, you know, you got rules, you got things you got to follow, you got deadlines on things, you got to meet expectations. And you've been looking for a job and you've been turned down for the 20th time, and all of a sudden, you know, you start questioning the rules, and you know, well, I don't agree with that, and you've lived an entitled life. Everything you actually need, not want, but if you really, really needed it, it was provided for you. Not the best. You know, the health care isn't the best in prison. The dental work isn't the best in prison and that, but if you really had to have it, it is provided for you. Well, you get out and it's not that way. And you got to fend for yourself. You got to figure out how to be responsible and make it on your own and make it for yourself. So all of a sudden, all of these things start compounding and weighing on them. And the truth is, prison life feels easier. It's easier to just do your time in prison. And you know, you're acclimated. You understand that culture and everything. But out here, this is hard. And so that romantic kind of a phase begins to pass. And that's when we have something to work with. While they're all elated and all of that kind of stuff, okay, just wait. The issues aren't coming to the surface yet. But you see, that's when all their character flaws are going to start to come up. And I don't get angry anymore. I'll give you a month or so, we'll see. All this stuff comes to the surface, but that's a huge part of re-entry, is that they have to know, they have to be secure in knowing that they're not going to just be kicked to the curb. They're used to failing. They're used to not making it and these things happening. They've lived by fright, fight, or flight. They don't work through things. They've never had those patterns in their lives. They're not used to working through the tough things and the struggles to success. And so when all of this stuff starts coming about and they face conflict, I got terrible conflict resolution skills. When the conflicts start happening, all these things come up, the character starts coming out, the real character of the man starts coming out. Ladies, that women's DTC is like a cat house sometimes, you know? Like you just took 10 stranger cats and threw them all into a cage. You know, I'm in programming with women and men is very different too. But I mean, with women, the biggest thing is they're looking for love in all the wrong places, you know? Their understanding, it's all about relationships, and their understandings of relationships with the opposite sex is just not good on many different levels. And all of that has to be taught. It's got to be learned, and that's not learned in a book. No.
Open it up for any other questions that anybody might,
And Kevin,
personal experience?
you mentioned everything they go through and everything. I'm telling you, brother, you hit it. I just walked through that this week. I had a friend that was incarcerated for a year. Went down, grabbed him, and it was just, man, you just described my whole week to a T. I mean, I was just blown away. I was like,
Right.
exactly.
Right on.
So you got all that right, but you mentioned one thing. In my mind, I'm going, okay, so what's the answer? You mentioned one thing, that first off, safe housing.
Yeah.
They got to have
Yeah.
safe housing. But are there some other things, some 1, 2, 3s, get this foundation and then work from there?
Yeah, you know, you have to be able to deal with the various different elements to that. And I mentioned character, dealing with character things. You have to be prepared to be able to do that, because you have to deal with addictions, drugs, sex, alcohol, just the myriad of different kinds of addictions that are typical of men and women coming out of prison. In many cases, it's typical of men and women in general out there. Just kind of multiply that by those coming out of prison. So there has to be something in place to deal with that, because it's probably going to hit them by surprise. If they were believers in prison, they come out with a false sense of security and not really prepared to deal with it, to grapple with that on the outside. What we do is celebrate recovery with that. And the reason why we do that, see, parole requires that our men and women coming out of prison go to something like AA and some type of addictive programming, dealing with that. But in our early years, we found out that by our men going there, that's before we had women in the program, when our men went there, we lost them. They were dropping like flies. Because everybody going there, the state was requiring them to go there. So they were going there high, they were selling drugs there and everything, and we were losing our men like that. So we have an agreement with parole that we do celebrate recovery with our men. The ladies do celebrate recovery with just the ladies in the program, no outsiders are in it. And we really work through, if you're familiar with that at all, it's hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Well, everybody's got that. So we're working through that. So addictive issues are part of that thing that you need. Education. You know, is he a tactile type person? Is he going to be blue collar? Does he have potential in other kind of areas and that? So education is big. If you can have some kind of education resources while they're in prison before they get out, that's even better. We got a guy who's, he gets out in 2014, he will have done 20 years flat when he gets out. He was probably 20 years old when he shot his wife and killed her. And they were both strung out on drugs, they were addicts. If he didn't shoot her, she would have shot him, kind of a thing. And it was just one of those really messy things. Well, he will have done 20 years flat when he gets out. When he gets out, he'll have a doctorate in biblical studies, Liberty University.
Yeah.
So things like, things like a job, that should be down the road,
No,
or
No.
right off the bat.
right off the bat, yeah.
So
Now,
like housing,
for him to have
a program and a job would be kind of like a foundation.
For him he needs a strong support group. And of course in the Christian community, that's church. But he needs a strong support group. He needs to know, there needs to be somebody who's checking up on him, calling him every single day. A man that's willing to meet with him and just say, hey, every week we're going to get together. Sometimes you can have agendas, sometimes it just needs to throw your agendas to the wind.
Yeah.
Let it be completely unstructured. But he needs to know that there's always somebody there for him that he can talk to. That could be a 10-second phone call. It could be an hour-long phone call. It's just whatever the need of the moment is, or maybe, if you're on the receiving end of it, maybe you're right in the middle of something and you can't take the call. Just, yeah, I'm right in the middle of this, let me give you a call back in half an hour. But he needs that strong support group built around him. So you got education, you got vocation, his job, and give him a few days just to have a meltdown. Just to kind of get his feet on the ground and stabilize a little bit and start to work with the tangibles out here in a few days or a week or that. Let's see.
We had a question back over.
Well, my question was, in your experience, when they enter the safe house, how much time does it usually take before they have their facility and their head together and they can walk out? And the other question is, what is the success rate in your experience?
Good questions. Well, for us, Arizona's recidivism is 67 to 70% recidivism tracked over a 3-year period of time. What our recidivism is, for those who graduate from the program on the men's side, it is 10% that go back to prison. On the women's side, it's 0.
Wow.
We've never had a woman go back to
Praise God.
prison. We've done it on the women's side for about 5 years now. On the men's side for about 13 years. So as far as recidivism, now, the other side to that coin is, I said, of those who graduate, we do lose a fair amount of guys coming out. And in that sense, when it comes to losses prior to graduation, it's harder on the men's side because men aren't nearly as relational. They're a lot more independent. They struggle a lot more with authority and stuff. And so it's one of the biggest challenges to programming with the guys when they get out is just keeping unity, keeping them engaged, keeping them involved, keeping their interest, keeping them working at and focused on developing themselves and working toward the goal of graduating from the program and stuff, because after they get comfortable with things and they start acclimating it to everything, then they're independent and they don't want to do it anymore.
What's the average time spent
To graduation?
to graduate?
We have tried that at different number of months. We've been all the way down to 6 months and all the way up to a year. And to answer your question, probably the average is ranging around 8 months or so. But what we're doing now is we put together a document that basically just says transition plan or goals for graduation. And this is what we want to see put in place for you to graduate. About 2/3 of it is objective. It's easy to say, okay, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. The last third of it is very subjective because it deals with what kind of a man of God are you or what kind of a woman of God are you. And so somebody has to say, yeah, I see 1 Corinthians 13 when I look at you. I see you embracing the love of Christ. I see the fruit of the Spirit working in your life and that. And also, going back way something even more fundamental in that is you need to decide what your target audience is. Who are you going to accept into the program? And what's your end goal? What's the end product? Begin with the end in mind. You know, what do you see that person looking like when he graduates from the program, and then build it backwards from there. Because you may be willing, when you put that together, you may say, well, you know what? If I just take men who really want to, women, who really want to work at making it on the outside, maybe I don't just need men who say they're born again Christians. But we're going to do Bible studies, and maybe as they come through the program, they'll give their life to Christ. We call ourselves a discipleship ministry. We're not a halfway house. In order to be in the program, you need to be a born-again Christian, you need to be a follower of Christ, and we need to see some evidence to that while you're in prison.
Who finances this, by the way? I mean, there is needs. I mean,
You got great questions.
Food, toilet paper, you know.
Hang on, I see you over here.
I see that hand.
I'm just,
There are so many different directions you can go with this, and you know, there's probably 2 or 3 systems that are typically done. What we do is it is 100% donor based. We raise everything. Actually, I said 100%. We have 73 bed capacity. We have like 19 different homes, 6-unit apartment complex, our church and offices, a 6-plex. We got a lot of different properties. And out of all of those properties, we have this bed space. And so you got graduate housing, where those who have graduated is kind of like a phase 2, if they want to, when they graduate. So there is an income that comes from that. But if you totaled up the possibility of what you can make on 73 beds, and our occupancy right now is like 61 beds. We have occupied right now, so we're not even full.
good.
But for those who program, we charge $115 a week. So if you do the math, you're somewhere around $28,000 if you stayed full. $28,000 coming in. That doesn't come anywhere close. Nowhere close. Our overhead's probably about $500,000 a year. So we're at $500,000. 28,000 a year isn't going to touch it. It might take care of facilities. So that's not our income. Every bit outside of that is 100% donor based. So that will also dictate a lot of where your time and resources and money goes. We put a tremendous amount of resources into raising funds.
Go ahead.
It was just heartfelt when you separated the difference between a halfway house and a safe house. I mean, you said it's not any halfway house that a man coming out of prison go to. I mean, it's not. I mean, you got disobediences going on in the house. So can you just explore a little bit on the difference? DDC has got a safe house. I mean, what's assured? I mean, they have testing going on when a guy comes.
Like UAs.
Right.
Okay, at a halfway house, and this is not an indictment on all of them, this is just typical.
Right.
You know, a halfway house is a business. They're making money. Somebody's making money, and that's what they're in business for. They're basically housing people, and that turns over money. So as long as you pay your rent, you don't cause any problems, you're good to go, but they don't care about you.
Right.
You're irrelevant to the picture. You're just a dollar sign to them. So that's a typical halfway house. Therefore, a halfway house is full of drug addicts and criminals, people with deviant behaviors and things like that. They're not safe places. They're not good places to be. If you're going to struggle with drugs and alcohol, you don't need to be in a place like that, because you are real close to falling to that yourself, because it's going to be all around you. You can get up from, they cram people in a lot of times. They're way overpopulated because it's all about the money. You can't even get up from your housing, from your bed space, and go take a shower and come back and know that your stuff's gonna be there. That's a typical kind of a halfway house. Now, I talk about safe housing, and I talk about what we are. At a halfway house, how long do you think you could go and not pay your rent because you didn't get a job and still be able to live there at the house? It doesn't last very long, a week, maybe 2 weeks tops. That's usually the way it goes, because you are a dollar sign. You cannot stay there if you cannot pay. We don't kick anybody to the curb. We've had guys go way into us for money. We've had guys go 5 months without paying a dime on rent. What we want to see is we want to believe that you're putting out good faith effort.
Amen.
You really are out there trying to get a job. Some guys, they just have issues. You look at the guy and you could say, no, nobody's going to hire you. You know, they got issues. Who's going to take them? If we don't take them, who is? If we don't reach out to him and help him, he'll get a job someday.